Hello everyone. Today we will be looking at the character of George from Of Mice and Men. This is to help those doing GCSE or IGCSE or any kind of affiliated English course. And let's go straight into it. I've planned an essay plan for George, and we'll be looking at how to combine AO1, which is knowledge, and AO4, the historical context, to produce a good essay within your exams when it comes to the character of George, in case a question on him comes up. So the first thing about George is a relationship with Lenny, and as you can clearly see, that has kind of taken up the first two paragraphs. So the first paragraph, I'm talking about the kind of start and the backdrop of the relationship with Lenny. And the quote used in this paragraph is, "Guys like us that work on ranches are the loneliest guys in the world. They ain't got nothing to look ahead to, but not us, because I got you to look after me, and you got me to look after you," which is highlighted here. Now, ranch workers at the time of the Great Depression were seen as being very isolated, mainly because many of them had been isolated and displaced from their homes, especially from the cities where lots of jobs were lost and lots of people were laid off. Hence, you had many farmers having to go from one place to one farm almost to another farm in order just to find a job, really. And this is almost what is seen through George. And the relationship that almost comes between George and Lenny is seen as an anomaly to this, because the kind of historical context at the time is the Great Depression and the laying off of workers combined with a series of droughts and the kind of natural hardship meant that there was lots of poverty and it was kind of hard to support one another, leading to many workers, if you look from, for example, the character of Carlson, being seen as isolated, though the relationship or the friendship of George and Lenny is seen as an anomaly, and this surprises many workers because even the boss, when they have their interview, says, "Well, I never seen one guy take so much trouble for another guy. I'd just like to know where your interest is," because even the boss doesn't believe them, that George, that and Lenny, that they're actually friends. They're not trying to take advantage, or for example, George is not taking advantage of Lenny, and that's one thing you should be looking at in the first paragraph. Is definitely the friendship that George forms with Lenny, as he's been seen as the smarter character, constantly guiding Lenny, and is at the forefront of this relationship as he controls Lenny, such that if he told him to walk over a cliff, over he'd go. So I think the first paragraph what you should be looking at is something along the lines of the friendship that George establishes, and you can almost take this theme of friendship and show it how is anomaly through the eyes of George in the kind of context of the Great Depression and the time, of course, that the John Steinbeck wrote this book. In the second paragraph, continuing on with the kind of theme of friendship, you can first look at the fact that even the most fruitful and blossoming relationships, they couldn't survive. So, even despite, you form this beautiful relationship with George and Lenny, what Steinbeck does really well, through, you can look at the lens of George here, is show that even the best meant relationships couldn't survive, and you could look at the poem, Robert Burns's poem, which is where the title comes from, with the line that says, "The best laid schemes o' mice and men gang aft agly," which means no matter how well we plan for the future, things often go wrong. And this was actually, this "O Mice and Men" here is where the title of Mice and Men came. So you can quote Robert Burns in this line, and show that how Steinbeck used it to show that no matter how amazing you might have a relationship, it simply could not survive the disparity of the Great Depression. And if you think about it, you can look at George and the American Dream, where they was to have the farm, the rabbit, and they had almost got the property, yet still it couldn't survive to the end because Lenny, after killing, mistakenly almost killing Curly's wife, was at risk of being lynched. So George shot him as an act of kindness. Again, a kind of ironic aspect. And again, this kind of kindness from George, you can continue by looking at how he's always been seen as a father figure throughout the book, taking care of Lenny ever since Aunt Clara passed away, saying to Lenny, "You never ought to drink water when it ain't running, Lenny." And you can then take this kind of context of George and how he helps Lenny is very unlike the time, because the AO4 that you can look at is there wasn't any kind of social care for the disabled until the 1935 Social Security Act, and therefore there was just a fear that Lenny could have been put in a booby hatch, which was a psychiatric hospital, and therefore the key thing here is always though to keep looking at the character of George, always mention, and basically show that his compassion, his aid or father figure of aiding Lenny is very unlike the time when there was little help to those who, like Lenny, might not have been the brightest at the time. And finally, in paragraph 3 of this essay plan, I would we'll be looking at how George can be seen as a smart character, a lead figure, and he's been seen by Steinbeck as a person who can take control, because at the end of the day, it is George's idea, and George is kind of maintaining the American dream that they want to, in order to take the land, farm the rabbits and the animals. It's all George who's planning this, and he almost like Lenny almost joins them eventually. Candy will join them as well. Even Crooks has to join them, but the kind of central pillar of the whole American dream rests with George. And this kind of smart sense of George is that like he might be short, but his brightness and vision make up for what he lacks in stature. And immediately, George can be seen to understand that Lenny will get into trouble before even entering the farm. This again showing the kind of smart nature of George of kind of being preeminative and trying to, what's it called, understand the situation. And therefore he tells Lenny, to hide in the brush. And he sees Curly's wife as potential threat and labels her jailbait even before, Lenny kills her. And again, that just shows George knew the foreboding threat that was coming. And that's kind of like the first half of this paragraph. You can look about the smart aspect of George. And then again, you can then look at George showing kindness by allowing Candy into his and Lenny's dream, and showing again about taking control. Once again, going back to the main theme of taking control about how you could swing that lady for $450. And again, when it comes to you can then look almost at the character of Candy. So the thing here is that this here can be an essay on George, but the AO4 in context, you can actually bring different characters into it through the lens of George. So you can look at, for example, George shows kindness by allowing Candy, and the reason Candy wants to come in is because there was no system of state pension, similar to what we talked about Lenny, and therefore Candy, who's old and disabled, felt he was constantly at risk of being canned, especially he'd lost an arm and he had little use as a swamper. So yep, that's the first essay plan that we have today on George. And we will be going through, I have all the characters lined up and lots of different themes: power, isolation, friendship, dreams, violence, animals, even settings and memories. So yeah, feel free to continue, like and subscribe, and hopefully we can build this from here. Thank you.